Hello and welcome to Cupcake Addiction's Game of Thrones Dragon Egg tutorial. I'm going to be showing you today how to make a really simple and amazing looking dragon egg from the Game of Thrones television series. If you love this idea, make sure that you give it a thumbs up, give it a share and tell your friends about it. The things that you'll need to make your dragon eggs. I'm using Easter eggs, so this next series of Game of Thrones is coming out just before Easter, which makes it the perfect time to go and pick yourself up some Easter eggs. If you're watching this somewhere that doesn't do Easter or you're watching this out of Easter season, you can also just grab Easter egg chocolate molds online. They're available year round and you can just make your own little hollow Easter eggs in white chocolate. I've got some shimmer sprays or some colour mists. So the most commonly available are going to be Wilton, but there's also a couple of other brands around that I thought I'd show you. We've got a PME, which does a great bronze, and AmeriColor's just brought out a range which does brown. So I've got a bit of brown, a bit of bronze, green, red and gold. I'm using a paintbrush, some white fondant, and I recommend making my recipe of marshmallow fondant for these. If you use store-bought fondant, it's still fine, but it's really sweet with white chocolate, whereas the marshmallow fondant kind of has that more marshmallowy taste to it, so it's not going to be as overpowering as store-bought fondant. I've got some corn flour in a shaker, a couple of circle cutters. So the one circle cutter that I've chosen is the same size roughly as the base of my Easter egg, and the other one's a bit smaller, and that's actually just going to be to sit my Easter egg in while we're working on it. I'm using a rose leaf cutter, so they're serrated on one side and smooth on the other, and we're going to be using the smooth side today. I've got a little bit of plain tap water and a pair of scissors, so let's get started. I'm also using a fondant rolling pin today, so I'm just going to put out a little bit of corn flour and we're going to roll out just a small amount of our white fondant. I've just rolled mine out to about that sort of a thickness, and then you're going to cut one of those larger circles for the bottom of our egg. Beautiful. Now you're going to use just plain tap water here, so turn your little disc over, a little bit of water on the back all the way around to the edges. Don't go too crazy with your water here either, you just want enough to sort of dampen it. Now, on the bottom of your egg, right in the middle, use that to stick that fondant disc down, and working quite quickly so that your hands aren't melting through the chocolate, just smooth it up. And I'm sort of smoothing it up so that I'm almost thinning out those edges a little bit and bringing them as flush as I can with the rest of the egg. Perfect. Now, you want to take your scissors. You can also use toothpicks here, but I found scissors gave me a slightly better effect. And you just want to kind of just cut little tiny nicks in it. And this is just going to be to rough up the bottom of our dragon egg. And if at any stage you feel like your egg's starting to melt or it's getting a little bit soft, just sit it into your second cookie cutter. So you'll see it's small enough that our little dragon egg sits nicely in there. That's just going to keep it off the bench and stop it from rolling around. But it also means you can work on it without having the heat of your hands touching it. Beautiful. Kind of looks a little bit like a hairy minion. Okay, now take your egg and turn it upside down. You want to roll out a bit more fondant, and for these sections we're going to roll this fondant really thin. You don't want it to be too thick here because we don't want a huge, big, thick, chunky layer of fondant covering our egg. It's going to be sweet enough as it is. So really nice and thin there for your fondant. And then you want to just cut out a couple of these little leaf shapes. This is by no means a difficult thing to make, but it is time consuming because there are a lot of these little leaves that need to be cut out. All right, once again using our water as glue here, you want to just take your water and not too much, just spread it on directly onto that egg in little sections. So I'm working just above that little bit of fondant, and I've done about 2 inches of that water. And then you want to take your little leaves, teardrop down, so pointed end down, and you just want to drape them, sticking them to that water on that egg, so they're just ever so slightly covering that line where you've stuck on that circle at the bottom. Like so. So you want to continue that all the way around your first layer. When you get to your second layer, you want to make sure that you're overlapping on the join here. So you're not going straight above the one underneath. You're actually sort of sticking your next leaf on, just ever so slightly overlapping those leaves underneath. Don't worry here if you can see any little bits of white chocolate Easter egg poking through, because we are going to be spraying this with colour. That's why I've opted to use a white egg and not a dark egg. If you were using a dark chocolate egg or a regular chocolate egg milk, then you would need to make sure that you're covering up all those little gaps so that you don't see them through the scales. As you start to get to the top, you'll notice you need to come in sort of closer and closer, almost like a little flower type shape up there. And then one final one right up on the very top. So there's not an exact amount for this roughed up bottom bit, and there's not an exact amount for that nice neat line of scales. So I just grabbed my scissors again and just rustled it up a little bit at the front of my egg where I know my egg's going to be sitting up sort of facing whoever's eating it, and just made that roughed up bottom come up a little bit so that it's a bit more visible and just so it's a bit less even. You will have a little bit of a circle line in the bottom, so just depending on how fussy you want to be, you can just go and just rough that up again. That's just from sitting that fondant while it was still drying into our little circle cutters. But if you just go around that again with your scissors, then you'll get that line out, no problems. Beautiful. Now when it came to the colours for this one, this is going to be my kind of bronzy, goldy brown egg. As I said, I've got a bronze there in a PME colour, and I've also got the Wilton gold. I was going to use the Americolour brown because it's actually really quite a good colour. It's quite dark. But I'm finding that it's spitting little chunks of brown food colouring out at me. So I'm not sure if this is just a bad bottle or what's going on, but I'm not going to use that one today. We're just going to work with the bronze and the gold. So first up, I'm going to give it a base coat of my main colour, which for me is going to be bronze. On this one here, it was green. So you want to just hold the egg, and a word of warning, everything is going to get covered in this spray. So starting at the bottom, and you can see I'm sort of quite a way back from my egg here. I just like to spray in these short, sharp little bursts. I find that if you spray in one continuous spray, you tend to use too much of the spray, and then you get sort of those dark lines. And if you spray too close, you can end up with little puddles of colour. So just from a distance and little short, sharp bursts. All right, once I've got my bottom section done, I can put it back into my little circle holder. Just make it a bit easier to spray the rest. So now you want to take your gold, and I found all of them had a slightly kind of a golden base on them. Depending on what colours you're using, these PME ones dry really, really quickly, but your Wilton ones are going to probably take 15 minutes or so just to dry, so just be careful how much you handle them to do this. Spray the bottom with a bit of gold, like so you've got that differentiation of colour. And then I like to come down, and I'm going to spray a bit heavier in colour on the very top of my egg, and leave it sort of graduating down to that gold colour. So back up here again with the bronze. Beautiful. I'm really happy with those colourings. I'm happy that it's starting nice and dark bronze on top, and then it's sort of graduating down to that gold. Look at me. It is not neat work. I look like something out of the Wizard of Oz. So we'll have a tidy up, and then we'll come back and do our red. All right, so once again, we're going to do that nice spray coating of the first colour, which for us is going to be red. That Wilton red, it's kind of a little pinky for what we want here. So I'm going to use a combination of the bronze and the gold just to kind of bring that colour down a little bit. So just spraying that first little coat of gold on the bottom. A bit more red there where I've missed a spot. And then I'm going to bring that bronze into it. So this is going to kind of make it like more of a browny kind of a colour, I guess. Something sort of like that on the bottom. So I'm doing kind of bronze around the sides, and I'll put a bit more red on, but this is just going to make it not so pinky red and more kind of that browny red that we want. Beautiful. And now a bit more of the red. Perfect. I'm really happy with that colour. Now, as I said, for those dragon eggs, you've kind of got that browny red, the browny goldy bronze, and then the kind of goldy bronzy green. Now finally, I chose to display my 3 dragon eggs in a nice box, but if you want to stand these up, say for individual place settings or for desserts, on plates, anything like that, and you need them to stand alone so they're not rolling around, you just want to take a little bit more of that fondant, and I like to wait till the eggs are semi-dry before I do this because you don't actually want them to stick. Make that roll of fondant, coil it around, and you can just break it off just so that you've made like a little circle. And then you can just lift your egg up. I'm not going to do the red one because I've just finished spraying that one, but this bronze one's nice and dry to touch, and you can just sit that in. It also enables you to sort of angle the egg back a little bit so that people can see it from its best angle. I hope you guys have loved this tutorial. I love Game of Thrones. I love everything Game of Thrones, and I love these eggs. I think they're such a simple but really, really cool idea. As always, thanks very much for tuning in to My Cupcake Addiction.